Hi students, in this video we're going to take a look at types of waste and incinerators versus landfills. So let's get to it. We'll start by taking a look at types of waste. So to see what you know already, which of the following stats about waste is correct? A, the largest component is plastic, the largest component is paper, the largest component is food scraps, the amount landfilled or incinerated each year increases, and the amount landfilled or incinerated each year decreases. So multiple mark MM means that there could be more than one correct choice. So go ahead and pause it now, and I want you to write down somewhere what you think is the best answer choices. Okay, welcome back. Let's see how you did. So B and E are correct. For E, each year more waste gets diverted from landfills by more recycling and more composting. If we take a look at municipal solid waste, this would be solid waste from houses and businesses, but not factories or large industries. So we can see that paper is the largest component, and plastics is also a large component. Yard trimmings, food scraps, metals, rubber, leather and textiles, wood, glass, and other. So many of these components we can actually divert from the landfill by either doing recycling or composting. So here's a little historical overview from the 1960s till now on waste management, and we can see that landfill has been a growing component over the last, well, we shouldn't say growing component, but we can see that the amount that we are landfilling is increasing in terms of total tonnage, millions of tons every year. But in terms of the actual percent of the trash or waste that we're landfilling, that has gotten smaller. And we can see that because we can see that the orange, which is combustion, has been growing, meaning that we are burning more trash than we are just landfilling it. But more importantly, we can see that we have been recovering more of it for recycling, and we've been recovering more of it for composting. And composting would also include the mulching that we saw at Tahigas landfill. So yes, we are definitely producing more and more waste with each coming decade. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're putting more in the landfill, because we're diverting it to other reuse or rot or composting or recycling pathways. So here's a look at total waste, and we can see the composition of waste and how that has changed. Paper has always been the largest component of the waste stream. It continues to be that way now. The one color that seems to be growing the most through time would have to be yellow. It starts off here as being very thin, and then it's getting very broad. And yellow is plastics, as we learned about from the Hidden Life of Garbage video. And so it's kind of a representation of our disposable economy. And we can also see other wood, leather, rubber, and textiles. They have also all increased, and I think mostly because we see an increase in consumer goods over the decades. So let's take a look at landfills versus incinerators. Which of the following is a useful byproduct of sanitary landfills? Go ahead and write down which you think is the correct one, and then pause. Alright, welcome back. Let's see how you did. If you said that D is the correct answer, that's correct. So it's a useful byproduct because we can burn it for energy, and they said that Tahigas 3,000 homes are being powered by the heat generated by burning the methane. And some comments on the other one for A, that leachate occurs, but it is polluted with heavy metals from electronics and chemicals from discarded medicines and other substances. So it is not nutrient rich, it's actually toxin rich. And then for answer choice B, don't confuse this with wastewater treatment. So in other words, we don't get useful fertilizer from the decomposition happening in landfills. That decomposition, A, is happening extremely slowly, and B, that decomposition is happening deep in the earth, so we're not really taking that stuff out and using it as fertilizer. But when we go to the wastewater treatment plant, we will see that we can use biosolids taken from the wastewater stream, the sewer pipes going to the treatment plant. And then future land for commercial development, the only thing you can do with finished landfills is build a park on it, which is awesome, but you cannot build homes or businesses. So Eadlings Park would be an example of that. So let's take a look at sanitary landfill. You can see here we have many of the components that we saw at Tahigas, and so one of the first things that we drove by was their what they call a cogeneration facility, and this is where they're using the methane, burning it to produce electricity. And we also saw them doing some collection of methane, and so here's a methane gas recovery well. So they drill holes into the ground, run pipes down in it, or they refer to it as straws, and that collects the methane. And then they divert that methane into their little electric power plant. And we also have leachate treatment system. So this leachate, so think about water landing, water going through the trash, getting collected down here in these deeper levels, where in this case you have gravel, and that gravel means it has pores where it can collect fluids, and then those fluids can be collected from pipes and pumped back up to the top. And then they can treat that leachate, or at least analyze it to see if there's anything really toxic in it. And first period, we got an especially strong smell at Tahigas because they were actually doing some treatment of that leachate. So it was giving off a lot of smell. By second period, that was done, so we weren't noticing it nearly as much. But we also see here plastic liners. Here they're colored in orange, but we saw them as black covers, and that's extremely important for keeping water that does land on the dirt from soaking into it, where it could contribute to leachate. And also it's trapping in methane, the plastic liner. And because they put the liner at the bottom here like this, it's preventing any toxic leachate. And by leachate we mean liquids that are leaching or seeping out of the sewage. Out of the waste. When that goes down into the ground, that plastic liner will keep it from getting into the groundwater. So you really don't want any of those chemicals from your leachate going into your groundwater. And as I said, the nice thing at the Tahigas landfill is that they're built on top of a nice layer of rock called shale. And so it's very difficult for the leachate to go through that layer of rock to get into the groundwater. And the groundwater is also especially deep at that location. Okay, so what else can we say here? Here's compacted impermeable clay, which they can also use in conjunction with plastic. And yeah, let's see, we saw them dumping the solid waste. And then they talk about honeycombs. They use that terminology. So the dirt that they're putting on top of the waste, that is to just separate the waste into compartments. By doing it in compartments like that, it leaves less exposed trash at one time, and that's really what they want. They only want a small area where trash is actually exposed so that you don't have as much wildlife coming into the area. Okay, here's an interesting picture of a park in Berkeley. Of course, we have our own local park, Eadlings Park, on top of a capped landfill. Some drawbacks of landfills. First of all, you have leachate, which will likely escape even from well-lined landfills. Dry conditions exist inside. To combat the leachate can cause slow bacterial decomposition. So in other words, you do want to keep it dry because that can reduce the amount of leaching water passing through that picks up bad stuff from the trash, heavy metals and things like that. However, that makes bacterial decomposition slow. And so as I mentioned, you could dig down and you can find newspapers that are basically still readable. You can find food that hasn't even decomposed. And they also produce methane, a greenhouse gas that contributes to global warming. So you can also look at that as an advantage. If you can capture the methane and use it for electricity, that's awesome. However, I think they were saying that they only capture about 75% of the methane at Tahigas, and the other 25% is slipping into the environment, into the atmosphere. And finding sites is difficult. We call it NIMBY, not in my backyard. Nobody really wants a stinky landfill to be near their home, which is one reason why it used to be in the Santa Barbara area, but then it's further up coast now. So which of the following is an advantage of incinerators, where you're actually burning the trash? So pause and think about that. Okay, let's see how you did here. So B is the only advantage that we can state here. Yes, you can get waste into energy. So you burn the waste, you get heat, the heat can be used to produce electricity. And we can talk more about that in class. You're basically heating water, which turns it to steam, and that steam is at a high pressure, and that pressure can turn a turbine. The high pressure gases can push through fans of a blade and make them turn, and that can turn a generator, making electricity. But as far as A, C, and D goes, so for A, you do get ash, but that ash must be landfilled because it contains heavy metals and other contaminants, not nutrients. And for C, you do get less air pollution than landfills because you have less methane, but you get tons more of other pollutants like particulates, which would be smoke, and dioxins from burning plastics. And we saw some of that in the story of stuff. And then D, you get methane for energy production. Well, methane comes from the anaerobic bacteria in landfills. It does not come from burning the trash. The similarity there would be that landfills produce methane, which you can burn to make electricity, or in incinerators, you just burn the trash directly, and that's how you can make electricity. So let's take a little look at incineration. So you see here what are called the smokestacks. They're very tall to help disperse the smoke. So it gets higher up, and if those particulates are gonna land, they're gonna land farther away from that location, maybe outside the city limits. And we can see some other things in this picture going on. This whatever contraption right here, it's called a scrubber, and it is helping to that's called a electrostatic precipitator. This is capturing some of the smoke before it goes out into the environment. So incineration is basically a controlled process of burning mixed solid waste at extremely high temperatures, and it reduces the volume by 90%. The ash from burning gets landfilled. So that's you know what it's like when you're at a bonfire. You start with a lot of wood, and in the end you have just a very small amount of ash. And it's better than open air burning because it's better than open air burning. Step back a minute. Because you are doing it in a controlled way where you're capturing as much of the smoke particulates as possible. However, it can create new chemical compounds and emit toxic chemicals from the stacks. So think of the smell of burning plastic. If you've ever been careless when you're cooking, you know that it can smell really bad. But here's the idea of waste to energy incineration. The waste comes in from the truck, and a crane comes and picks it up, drops it in a furnace. It makes heat inside of what's called a boiler. That boiler is going to take your water, it's going to turn it to steam. The steam flows through the turbine, causing it to spin, and that generates electricity. And the smoke from the burning process goes to a scrubber. You can see some shower heads here. They're basically trying to two things. They're trying to chemically wash some of the sulfur that might be in the smoke, but then they're also trying to just capture as much of that, or generally cleanse it before it gets to the baghouse. And the baghouse is a place where you're capturing as much of the ash as possible. Not only the ash, but also you can say ash that's in smoke form. So in the baghouse, you can be collecting some of that ash, and then eventually gets into this stream here, which goes to your truck. What eventually makes it through these two things is what's coming out of the smokestack. So that's already gone through 2 steps of trying to get cleaned up. Okay, so that's a little overview of incineration versus landfills. And so we can go over the questions that you have. Right now on your paper, I'd like you to write down some questions that you have so we can clarify things tomorrow. All right, thank you.